Hello. Okay. I just had 6 tips I wanted to go through and discuss briefly based on some of my experience mentoring people and working with younger artists in the industry. Um, and I think they're helpful for everyone, but mainly for beginners. So if you're a seasoned artist and you're watching this, you probably don't need 6 tips to help you. But I think the things that are important. So let's get started. Um, I got my eraser brush. Um, 6 tips. Tip number 1 is watch and learn. Watch and learn. Basically, if you're starting out in the industry, if you're trying to become professional artists, professional comics artists, professional concept artists, illustrator, any of those fields, I think it's worth finding a way to watch a professional you admire work uninterrupted without the video being sped up. So it's kind of hard to actually find this because most artists, when they post up a video, they speed up the video and talk over it. But lots of artists that are professional stream their work now, and you can probably find one of them doing a live stream where you can watch them work as they talk and see how fast they really are. Um, I used to watch live streams when I started. I mean, I still do. I still watch live streams all the time. But watching videos from Dave Raposa, Dan Warren, and then going to the Massive Black Workshop in 2013 and actually seeing an array of professionals working live really helped me out. You can actually see how long some of these guys take painting and drawing. And most often, the artists that you admire that are working professionally take much longer than you realize. They just work consistently and they don't stop to like check social media or skip a video or something. They sit down, start drawing, and they just keep going until they're done with their art. And it'll take longer than you think. Like you'll see some people work and you'll realize like, oh, actually I draw much faster than this artist. But this artist, they're just working nonstop. That's the main difference I've seen is the professional artists just start working and they don't stop working. They just keep moving the pen across the page. When I say work, I mean moving pen across page or, getting actually moving stuff on the screen or drawing on paper. So watch and learn. I think it's very valuable to see how fast people really are, how slow artists really are. I watched this manga documentary, and this artist spent like, I want to say it was like 6 hours doing one drawing of one person. And I think for a lot of people, that's like, well, that's a long time just to draw one person. But they just take that long. That's just how long it takes. And they just work every day and they get stuff done. On the flip side, you also see how fast certain artists are. You'll see people that go crazy fast and that are very impressive. And what that, to me, helps you understand is that it's possible to go faster and that you haven't hit the limit yet. Like when you're driving a car and you're going as fast as you think you can, and then you should never do this, but if you're driving a car and you think you're going fast, there's always going to be someone ripping by you going even faster in a faster car. There's always a way to go faster, and it's just something that I think it's helpful to know because it creates an aspirational kind of ladder you can climb. So you either know that you're consistent and you're slow but you're good, or you can even be faster. So watching and learning that way helps you with all these kinds of aspects of development. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Next one, time yourself. Okay, so we just talked about learning speed. with other artists, and so watching and learning from other artists teaches you a lot, and like how long they take, or how long they don't take. But you will never know how long you take until you time yourself. And I think when you start working professionally, oftentimes people ask you, how long is this going to take? Like, or they'll ask you, how much time do you need? And a lot of new artists, young artists, they just have no idea. They're like, I don't know, like a week, and sometimes when you're working and you're not really paying attention, you're kind of working, you can time yourself, and you might take like way longer to finish a piece because you're distracted. And so you time yourself and you realize like, oh, it took me like 6 hours to do one character. But then you think about like the actual time your pen is touching paper and making marks. It's normally less than that, and timing yourself really helps. I think the best way I've found to time myself with my tools that I have is to do a screen recording on my iPad. So I press screen record, I immediately jump into Procreate or Clip Studio or whatever program I'm working in, and I just start drawing. And you just keep working while the screen is recording, and you can see how much you can get done. See how fast it takes you to like completely paint one head, paint one whole character. Like, what does it take to paint one whole character? Draw and paint them. You're probably going to be working faster than you think if you're focused. So timing yourself is the only way to reveal how fast you really are, and give you the estimates you need to be able to tell a client like, hey, I need like 4 days to get this done. And that might be exactly what you need, but you'll never know until you time yourself. It's also good for like charging money. Thanks, someone's in chat. It's good for charging money. Like, someone's going to ask you like, what's your hourly rate? What's your rate? Maybe if you're super fast, your rate's like way higher because you're going to take less time working on it, so you need your rate adjusted to be higher. So let's say you knock out an illustration in like 2 hours. That's really fast, right? You can probably be getting a rate of like $100 an hour, so 2 hours of work is $200, right? You shouldn't really use an hourly rate when you're working professionally. That's a whole nother talk though. And there's other videos on YouTube that explain value-based pricing over time-based pricing. But if you're stuck for some reason using an hourly rate, I advise you to time yourself first. See how long it really takes you to do something. And then the faster you are, the more money you charge. And that's how you explain to the client. You'd be like, hey, like, I work really fast, so this is going to be done in like 3 hours, this whole image. And then they'll be like, wow, okay, so they're paying for this like really professional speed that you have. Conversely, if you time yourself and you're like super slow, you're like incredibly slow, that's when you gotta like determine, like, do you charge less and work longer hours, or do you make yourself work faster? That's like the beginners, when you start off and you're trying to work on an hourly rate, you need to determine, like, at what point is it on me to be faster, and it's not really the client's problem. So that's part of growth and part of developing. You'll just have to figure that out on your own. Everyone's different, but timing yourself tells you all this data. And I think a lot of the 6 tips I'm talking about today really kind of give you data to kind of like judge your own work by, and to give you information to use while you're working. I got a question in chat. It says, I finish commissions in a week and charge $100 USD for my full package. Is that a good pricing or not? Commissions are different. To me, when people commission you, they're expecting kind of an affordable piece of original art. I think most people that commission, they're like, it's like a fan art commission, and they're expecting to pay only a certain amount for a custom character. Now, you can be like an artist who has a really sick style and you're doing like traditional images and you're doing like crazy ink, illustrations or something and painted, that's different. The more input and like the more traditional it is, the more you can charge. This is all just based on my experience looking online. I think $100 is a good rate for a commission. To me, that's a good rate if I can knock it out in the evening. If I could like spend 4 hours painting or drawing and just like knock out a character in like an evening, then it's like $100. It's like, hey, look, I like watched a movie, I made $100. I think that's decent to start. If it was traditional, like traditional ink paper with like paints and markers and stuff, I would charge much more. But you kind of got to build the reputation to charge more. So when you start off, you have to charge a little bit less. Is it worth the full package for a whole week of work? It's pretty low if it takes you that long, but that's more of an incentive on you to get faster than it is for like you to charge more. It depends on the look of the whatever you're doing too. If it's like a fully rendered painting, I would look into charging more. And this is all with like fan art commissions. If you're commissioned by like a company, that's like we call that being contracted. If you're contracted, it's normally by a company, and that's a different situation. You should charge more than $100 for sure. Let's move on real quick. So the next tip: set a deadline. These are all stuff to help the beginner. So you've watched and you've learned like how fast other artists are, and maybe you're pretty fast actually. Maybe you realize, hey, once I focus, I'm pretty fast, and you've timed yourself, and you realize like, yeah, I can get a decent illustration done in like 4 hours. It's like about half a day's work. It's pretty good. So now, you have a project you're working on. You're working on illustration for your portfolio. You're working on your first comic. You're working on a video of tips for other artists. You gotta set a deadline. You gotta set up some kind of deadline for yourself, so you start accomplishing these goals. And I think that's the one thing that most beginners don't do. They don't give themselves a strict deadline. You can get much more work done if you set yourself deadlines and force yourself to stop and move on. And it can be a challenge, and that's kind of the point. You kind of want a challenge to focus on your speed and focus on like the final outcome needs to be delivered in such a way that you're happy, right? So you got to give yourself a deadline. Like, if I say I'm working on a comic this summer, my big deadline to myself was by the end of the summer I want to finish it, and then my loose window was like I wanted to like finish it by September. So like by September I want my comic to be done. And this is my first time doing a comic, so for me the best thing for me to do is to break up the comic into smaller steps and give myself like deadlines for each step. So one week I told myself I'm going to write the script today. So by the end of the day the script will be written. And then I started designing the components of the comic. So I told myself, well, this next month I'm going to design everything that's going to be in the comic, the characters, the like vehicles and some environments and stuff. I want to design all that first because I want to know what I'm going to draw later. I don't want to make it up as I go, because if I make it up as I go, it's going to take me more time. So I set myself a month deadline to get that done. So it's like, okay, there's like a day and then a month, and then you have to break the script up. So each section for me is a deadline to get myself to finish. And it's been working so far. The only hiccup I had is that I got some freelance work this summer, and it kind of ruined my schedule a little bit. But it's money, so it's good. So set a deadline. It's going to get you to accomplish things faster, and also realize how long things are taking. I think for some people, like if you've never done a full painting before and you set a deadline for like I want to get it done by Friday, and you work full time somewhere else, you start realizing like, actually, if I only have maybe 4 hours of work a day to do this, and I'm kind of slow, that deadline of Friday is unrealistic, and I need to allow myself 2 extra days of time, and in that case, 2 extra days would equivocate to 1 full day of work. But anyway, set the deadline. You'll start realizing how long things really take you, and this is all this stuff. Like I said, is to get you information. Watch and learn how long people take to work on stuff. Gauge yourself, time yourself, get some information, set deadlines, and then figure out if you're hitting those deadlines. You have 7K followers on IG. People told me to raise rates, but I'm kind of shy. Yeah, I got a short comic I'm working on, like this weekend and like next week. So there's actually a shorter comic. It's like a 5-page horror comic. It's really simple, but I wanted to like practice doing a comic that's different from the full comic I'm doing. So that's happening first, and that's like a little mini assignment I gave myself because I want some practice storytelling with panels before I jump into the big one. So it's kind of like a little check-in. If people say you should raise your rates, if people are telling you should raise your rates, you should definitely raise your rates. This is one way to find out if you should raise your rates. If you're getting overwhelmed by commissions, and it's like there's way too many commissions, and there's no way you're going to be able to finish all the commissions, and people just keep coming to you with commissions. If every commission takes you a week, and you're only charging $100, then you need to afford yourself more time by raising your rates and kind of weeding out the people that don't really want the commission. People that really want the commission will pay more to get it. And people that kind of wanted the commission, you won't get their money, but you will get more money from the people that you do get commissioned by. So raising your rates will help you like tone down the workload. If you find yourself getting overwhelmed by work, it's because you're too affordable. And you want to be, to a degree, you want to be less approachable. You want people that approach you with money to hire you to really like have a lot of money. That's kind of how you want to kind of scale up constantly. So at first you start at $100, and then ideally you jump to 200. And you can't do crazy jumps though. When you do start increasing your rates, you don't go from like 100 to 200. That's like double, right? You'd start by going, well, my rates are now 150, and then you kind of incrementally go up. So maybe every 2 commissions you start increasing your rates. It's like 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks you increase your rates if you're getting constant like people coming in. But it needs to be a matter of like weeding out the people that can't afford you. You want people to not be able to afford you. You want certain people to just be like, I can't afford him, but I would love to have a piece by them or her. I'm sorry, I don't know your gender. So that's how you should raise your rates, right? Anyway, 6 tips. Let's move on. What's the goal? This question, whenever people ask me for feedback or critique, the number one question I have, the first question I ask is, what's the goal of the piece? What is the piece supposed to be? That answer could be many things. The answer could be, I want the piece to be a character design for my portfolio. And so me would be like, okay, well the goal is to get this piece to be good enough to put in your portfolio. The other goal would be like when you design a character, you're designing a character for something. So like, what's the goal of like the character? Like, it's a character for a fantasy video game. Okay, there's like more information to guide me with the feedback, because maybe you drew a really amazing horror character, but you're like, I want it to be for a children's book, and I'd be like, okay, well, you missed the mark, because your goal is completely separate from what you've accomplished. But you got to know the goal for yourself, because it helps you determine where to put the investment and time. When I watched videos on comic artists working, I found that a lot of comic artists don't draw everything from scratch. They'll draw the characters from scratch, but sometimes with the backgrounds, they'll take photos and like trace backgrounds just to get the background looking really good, and then they draw the character in on top. And the way I see it is that the final product is a comic. It's a story that you're reading, and you're being guided through the pictures, and the artist isn't trying to show off their great skills at drawing landscapes. They're trying to show off their storytelling skills. So in the case of like a comic, if the goal is a finished story to tell, you might want to make some shortcuts for yourself. Maybe you trace backgrounds because you want to lock in the background. That's one example. Maybe you hire somebody to do backgrounds that loves doing backgrounds, and they do the backgrounds for you. That's what happens in like manga studios a lot in Japan. There'll be an assistant that does the backgrounds. So that being able to hire someone's a whole different question, right? And if you're a beginner, that's like kind of that's kind of out there. The idea that you're going to be able to hire somebody, but you might be able to do a trade, where maybe someone that's really good at environments will do trade work for someone that's too good at characters, and you can maybe swap some kind of art thing. But knowing the goal of the piece is very important. Otherwise, you don't know what you're doing. I hear people all the time come to me and they'll say like, can you get feedback on this piece? I go, well, what's the goal? What are you trying to do? And they're like, well, I want to do illustration, I want to do concept art, and I'd love to work in animation. And it's like all these things are like separate industries, and they're all very hard industries to do. So trying to do just illustration is very tough, and trying to do comic books is tough. I say tough, I mean like it's tough to get that professional level like salary coming in so you can make a living off of it. It's not tough to do it. You can just draw a comic anytime you want. You can just start drawing a comic tomorrow, and you'll be you drawing a comic. But drawing a comic that garners a bunch of audiences, like people's eyes, onto the medium to make you money, that gets harder. And so any of these industries are hard. So what's the goal? It would be like, well, I want to be an illustrator. If your goal is to be an illustrator, that helps me give you feedback. If your goal is to be a concept artist, that gives me other information that I need to give you, because it's a little bit different being a concept artist and an illustrator. They both tell stories, and they both tell, like, they make designs, and they both draw. But there's different goals with each practice. An illustrator might paint and draw everything from scratch. A concept artist might photo bash. They might take photos from life and actually composite the photos onto a design. Or they might sculpt in 3D, right? That's the difference. Like, concept artist has different techniques than an illustrator would. So it'll inform the process and also what you're thinking about. So yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Know what you're drawing. This is like a interesting topic, not interesting like tip, right? Know what you're drawing. So if you got to draw a gorilla in a zoo scene of a comic, you need to make sure you know what a gorilla looks like. And I say that, and it sounds really obvious, but a lot of people start drawing a scene, and it'll be like one of my mentees is drawing a kind of a spellcaster guy, reading in a room. And the one thing they've draped him in this like robe, and the initial pass they sent me, some of the wrinkles don't look right. They don't look like a real shirt robe hanging off of a body. And that just tells me, as the critiquer, that they haven't pulled up a reference to know what a robe hanging off a body looks like. So they don't even know what they're drawing, really. You might think you know. Like if I told you to draw a dog, you might go, I think I could draw a dog, and you start drawing what you think is a dog. But if I told you specifically, draw me a Dalmatian, like, do you know the specifics of a Dalmatian to draw a Dalmatian? We know it has spots, but what about the head shape, the body shape? How long is the tail? How long are the ears? Like, do you really know how to draw a Dalmatian, or do you think you know? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes you can just indicate a dog for like a scene for like a comic or something, and that's enough. But sometimes you need to really like be specific about a breed or something, or it could be like a car. And if you don't like, I don't draw cars that often, right? So if someone says draw me a car, I can kind of draw a car, but I don't exactly know everything that a car needs to make it believably a car. I mean, it'll look believably like a car, but it won't be a specific car. It won't be like, I could kind of draw a Volkswagen Beetle. That one's kind of easy shape to draw, but I would need to look up pictures. So you got to know what you're going to draw because it saves you time, right? So this all goes back to like saving time and managing time. Um, know what you're going to draw. It's another way of saying look up reference, and it's another way of saying do studies because that'll help you know what you're drawing. Um, but I think sometimes if people go into a piece and they start drawing like a person over a cauldron and lights hitting from underneath them, and they haven't taken a picture of a flashlight underneath the face or something to like give you an idea of what lighting looks like in that situation. So know what you're going to draw, study for it, pull up references. It'll save you time. Last tip, then maybe we'll answer a couple questions. Last tip is set check-ins for validation. This is a really big one. When you're working on an illustration or a concept or a comic, anything, you need to set check-in points in your process to validate that you are going the right way. So if you're working for somebody, this is easier for me to explain if you're working for somebody. So if you're working for somebody and you're doing an illustration, you might start off by, if they say design me a knight in a dark fantasy style, the first thing you got to ask yourself is like, is what I think dark fantasy and what they think dark fantasy, are those the same things? So when you start doing your research to like research knight armor, you need to cross-check your research with the client so you guys are on the same page before you move forward. So that's a check-in point, right? So your first check-in points with references and research, just to make sure you're on the same page. Then you need to start designing the thumbnail of the knight. This is for like a concept art, right? Or illustration has thumbnails too, but you start designing the thumbnail, the scene, or the knight itself, right? The character, and you might do 1, 2, 3. I like to do 10, at least 10, to kind of get exploration going. What you'll find is that at that point, you need direction on where to go. Like you'll have to, let's say you do 50 thumbnails. You'll need to pick out one of those thumbnails and decide which one is going to be the correct one to go. If you're working for a client, my tip would be take your 5 favorite or your 10 favorite thumbnails and only give them the 10. You don't need to show them 100. That's ridiculous. But maybe show them 10 to 5 thumbnails of the 100 that you did. And let them decide what they like. That's a check-in point again. So you check in at the research, then you check in the thumbnails, and then the next stages is more obvious. So then you do sketches, and then you show the sketch before you do a rough sketch. Before you go into the final lines, you have another check-in point, and you keep creating check-in points before each big stage change. So if stage 1 is research, stage 2 is thumbnail, stage 3 is rough sketch. Between each stage should be a check-in point for yourself with your client to course correct. If you're doing something wrong, they don't want that. You got to course correct, or just approval. So approval for the design, approval for the drawing. You want that before you move forward, or else you're going to find yourself having to fix things later, and it's going to take up your time, and it's going to eat into your budget. Or sorry, it's going to eat into your client's budget. It's going to eat into your rate. So if you find out you've got to like redo a bunch of stuff because you went too far down the rabbit hole, and you just finished an illustration without checking in, most people don't want that. Most clients don't want you just to start drawing without asking them for any feedback. So I always say set check-in points for validation. At each stage of your process, you should have a check-in point. And if you find yourself having to do a bunch of rework, if you're like, man, every time I work with somebody, I keep having to like redo the final illustration, that just tells you that you need an extra check-in point somewhere. There needs to be a new check-in point from like, maybe it's from sketch to rough, from rough sketch to like final lines. Maybe the check-in point needs to be there. Or maybe you need a check-in point between the color flats and the render. So maybe you need to like set up your color palettes early, lock it in, get that approved, and then do your rendering. I don't know where you're going to need this step, but if you keep finding yourself having to rework later stage in the job, it's because you need another check-in point. And that's something that I've had to explain to my mentees. I've had to work through it myself at work when I realized like I went too far and I didn't get a check-in. That was like an early mistake. I'd keep making it work. My boss would come to me and be like, you just moved forward without stopping to like, get the approval. And now I got to do more work, which is wasting the company money, wasting my time. And a valid check-in point, more check-in points is the solution to that problem. Okay. So those are my tips. Those are 6 tips I wanted to give y'all. Hope that makes sense. I know I answered a little bit of the chat during this video, so but the tips are there. Watch and learn, time yourself, set a deadline. What's the goal? Know what you're drawing. Set check-in points for validation. They're all to save time. They're all to they're all to save time and to make you more productive. I'm going to cut the video here. I'll talk to you later.